In order to learn how to play every chord in a minor key, and therefore which chords work together when writing chord progressions or songs in a minor key, we first need to understand some basic principles, the first being the natural minor scale. Here is the natural minor scale. For demonstration purposes, we will start the scale on the 3rd fret of the low E string. As this is a G note, then this will place us in the key of G minor, but you could use everything learnt in this lesson to play in any other minor key, which I will explain later on in the lesson. Now let's assign a number to each of the notes in the scale, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And now for every note of the natural minor scale, we need to assign a specific type of chord. If you're already familiar with the 7 chord types built from the major scale, so major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, and diminished, then this will be easy to memorize, as it's exactly the same sequence, but starting from the 6th chord. So we need to do some rearranging. The sequence of chords in a minor key would now be minor, diminished, major, minor, minor, major, major. You may also see this depicted using Roman numerals, which would look like this. I would advise you to memorize this order of chords, as it will form the basis for knowing all 7 chords in a minor key, and therefore is an integral part of this lesson. Something that may help with this is knowing that the 1, 4, and 5 chords, that are all major chord types within a major key, are now minor chord types. And the 3rd, 6th, and 7th chords are major, which just leaves us with the 2 chord, which is diminished. Now let's put these 2 elements, the natural minor scale and the order of the chords in a minor key, to work out every chord in a minor key, starting with the 1 chord. As our first note in the natural minor scale is a G note, and as we now know, the chord type of our 1 chord is minor, we can now say that the first chord in the key of G minor is a G minor chord. You could play this as a standard minor bar chord starting from our G note, which is the first note in our scale. As the 1 chord is kind of obvious, G minor being the first chord in the key of G minor, let's not spend too much time on this one and move on to our 2 chord. As our second note in the minor scale is an A note, and our second chord in a minor key is diminished, then we would call the 2 chord A diminished. If you're unfamiliar with how to play a diminished triad from an E string root, then follow the chord shape on screen. You could play this as a bar or with individual fingers. Just watch out for the B and E strings, as these should not be included in the chord. Now, diminished chords are full of tension and might not sound great in isolation, but if resolved correctly, they can add interest to otherwise predictable or boring sounding chord progressions. As the 3rd note in the minor scale is a B flat, and our 3rd chord is major, then we would call our 3 chord B flat major, or just B flat. You could play this with a standard bar chord shape starting from the 3rd note being a B flat in your scale. As the 4th note in the natural minor scale is a C note, and our 4 chord is minor, then we would call the 4 chord C minor, which we could play with a minor bar chord shape starting from the 4th note, or C note, in our minor scale. As the 5th note in our minor scale is a D note, and our 5 chord is minor, we would call our 5 chord D minor, which you could play as a minor bar chord starting from the 5th note, or D note, in the scale. It's also common to change this 5 chord to a dominant 7th chord type, although technically this chord belongs to the harmonic minor scale. I will cover this in more depth in future lessons, but for now just be aware that this might be another interesting option for your 5 chord when writing songs in a minor key. As the 6th note in the natural minor scale is an E flat note, and the 6th chord is major, we would name this chord E flat major, or just E flat. You could play this as a bar chord starting from the 6th note, or E flat note, in the scale. As the 7th and last note in the major scale is an F note, and the 7th chord type is a major chord, then we would call this chord an F major, or just F. As there's multiple ways of playing the same chords in different positions on the fretboard, then feel free to go ahead and use any of these chord shapes that you may already know. For example, this F chord you could just play as a bar chord starting from the 1st fret. However, I'm showing you how to play each of these chords starting from their position in the scale for a reason, so bear with me. To play this chord starting from the 7th note in our scale, we could take a simple D chord and shift it up by 3 frets, or semitones. And of course, as the open D string is part of the D shape, then this would have to be moved up 3 frets also, giving us a nice way of playing an F chord from the root position in the scale. If you're unfamiliar with the concept of shifting existing open chords that you already know around the neck to form new chords, then you should check out my series on the cage system for guitar, which will break this subject down for you easily. But let's move on. So altogether we have 7 chords in the key of G minor, these being G minor, A diminished, B flat major, C minor, D minor, E flat major, and F major. As these chords belong in the same key, you can technically play them in any order and they will all sound good together. You can try this out to begin writing your own songs or chord progressions in a minor key, which is really the main point of this lesson. Now, everything we've talked about so far has been in relation to the key of G minor, but what if we wanted to change key or write a chord progression in a different key altogether? This brings us to the reason I've asked you to play our 7 chords starting from their place in the natural minor scale, as opposed to the numerous places you could play these chords elsewhere on the guitar fretboard. To change key, all you need to do is shift the natural minor scale to the new desired key. For example, if we wanted to know the chords in the key of A minor, then we would simply play our minor scale starting from the 5th fret of the low E string, which would be an A note. From here, all the previously learnt steps would remain the same. So we would still have our 1 chord, which would now become an A minor, as our first note is an A. Our 2nd chord would now be B diminished. Our 3rd chord is now C major. Our 4th chord is D minor, and our 5th chord is E minor. Our 6th chord would be F major, and our 7th chord G major. So the only thing that's changed are the names of the notes. The chord types, however, remain the same. You could apply this to any key and it would work using the same 7 chord shapes. This is also useful if you think in terms of numbers or Roman numerals instead of chord names. For example, you could play a 1-4-5 in the key of G minor, so G minor, C minor, and D minor, and all you would need to do to change key would be to move your scale's starting position. So in this example, our G minor, C minor, and D minor, so the 1, 4, and 5 chords, would become A minor, D minor, and E minor. Feel free to like and comment below if you enjoyed this lesson, and if you're new to the channel, then hit the subscribe button below. See you in the next one.